My name is Emily, and after the sudden death of my parents in a car accident, I felt like life had lost its meaning. Everything that once brought me joy seemed distant, as if the world around me had turned to gray. I needed to escape, to find a place where I could heal, a place far away from the noise of the city. That's when I stumbled upon an ad for a job at a remote farm in the woods. It promised solitude, peace, and a chance to start over. After some research, I made the decision to leave behind the chaos of my old life and head to this unknown place. The farm was located deep in the heart of a dense forest, far from any major roads. It seemed almost untouched by time, like it existed in its own little world. The surrounding area was peaceful, too peaceful perhaps, and the isolation felt both comforting and eerie at the same time. The people living here were strange, distant, yet oddly serene. They dressed plainly, in muted colors, and rarely spoke more than necessary. Their eyes seemed to hold some kind of secret, something unspoken that was hidden beneath the surface. When I arrived, I was given a small, humble room in one of the wooden cabins. The space was simple, nothing luxurious, just enough to survive. The air was thick with a strange silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The first few days passed quietly, and I spent most of my time doing small chores around the farm, feeding the animals, tidying up the gardens, and helping with the crops. The work wasn't hard, but there was an unspoken rule to everything. People here didn't speak much. They followed their tasks with precision, never straying from the routine. The whole place felt like it was running on autopilot, and I was just another cog in the machine. As the days went on, I began to notice subtle things, little signs that seemed out of place. People would avoid making eye contact for too long. The rules here were never explained, but everyone followed them. There was a strange order to everything, something I couldn't quite understand. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my work, convincing myself that I was just overthinking things, but deep down I knew something was off. At night, when the sounds of the farm faded into silence, I would lie in my small room, staring at the shadows on the walls. The wind howled outside, and I could hear the creaking of the wooden beams as the house settled into the night. It was unsettling, but I told myself it was just the wind. Yet the longer I stayed, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was as if someone or something was always watching me. Every small sound seemed amplified in the stillness of the night. I started to feel as though this place wasn't just a refuge. It was something much darker, hiding just beneath the surface. And so I began to wonder, what exactly was I really a part of? I had always thought that running away from my past would bring me peace, but I was wrong. My life, once filled with laughter and joy, had turned to ashes in the blink of an eye. The accident had shattered everything I knew, leaving me in a numb, hollow state. I couldn't face the world outside anymore, and the weight of my grief felt unbearable. It wasn't just the loss of my parents, it was the fact that I was left alone, with no real connection to anyone or anything. I found the ad for this farm on a cold autumn evening while scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the crushing weight of reality. It was a simple job offer. Live in peace and harmony with nature at the faraway farm. Room and board provided. Contact us for more details. There was something about the simplicity of it that caught my attention. It wasn't flashy or desperate, just a promise of quiet, of peace, something I was desperate for. I didn't hesitate. The decision felt almost impulsive, yet somehow right. I packed up my things, left behind my old life in the city, and set off for this strange, isolated farm. It felt like an escape, a chance to start over in a place where nobody knew me, where I could bury my past and reinvent myself. Maybe I could find solace here, or at least a temporary break from the never-ending pain. The journey to the farm was long. I drove for hours. the road winding through thick forests and hills until the landscape seemed to stretch out in front of me, untouched by time. The area felt ancient, with towering trees and sprawling fields that seemed to swallow up the road. The deeper I drove into the woods, the more isolated I became. There were no signs of civilization, no houses, no other cars. It was as if the world outside had simply ceased to exist. I wondered if I was making a mistake, but there was no turning back. I had come this far, and at that point, the only thing I wanted was to find a place where I could disappear from everything that had hurt me. When I arrived, I was greeted by the sight of the farm, an old rustic compound with weathered wooden cabins and neatly arranged gardens. It looked peaceful, even idyllic. I was shown to my small cabin, which had just enough space for me to sleep and work. The air was crisp and clean, the scent of pine and earth filling my lungs. There was a sense of serenity that I couldn't help but appreciate. But as I settled in, I started to notice the oddness of this place. People didn't talk much, and when they did, their voices were soft, measured, almost as if they were careful about what they said. There was a certain formality in the air that I couldn't place, like everyone was following an unspoken rule. There was something so deliberate about their actions, their silences. It wasn't the peaceful escape I'd imagined. It was more controlled, more distant. The other workers, mostly older men and women, didn't seem to notice me at first. They went about their tasks quietly, without much exchange. Every action felt routine, mechanical, almost as if they were part of a ritual. No one ever seemed to question the rules they followed, and if they did, they never spoke of it. I found myself wondering what exactly I had gotten myself into. Why did this place feel so off? The peaceful quiet had a heavy weight to it, a tension that hovered just beneath the surface. It was clear that I was the outsider, the newcomer. And as much as I tried to blend in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting to pull me deeper into the fold. It didn't take long before the first strange rule became clear. The workers here followed an exact schedule, waking up at 5 a.m. sharp, eating their meals in silence, and working until the sun went down. The routine was strict, and any deviation was noticed immediately. At first, I thought it was just a way of keeping things organized. But as I continued to observe, I realized there was more to it. I had been warned about one particular rule: do not look into someone's eyes for too long. It seemed odd at first, but soon I saw its effects. If you held someone's gaze for too long, they would turn away quickly, their face blank, as though they were hiding something. I didn't know why, but I followed the rule, not wanting to make anyone uncomfortable. It was as if there was a boundary, invisible but powerful, that kept everyone from truly connecting with each other. It was clear to me now that this was not just a place for peace. It was a place governed by unseen forces, by rules that no one dared question. But the question lingered in my mind. Why? Why were they here? Why were they so eager to follow these rules so strictly? I had to know more, but at the same time, I feared what the answers might be. I stayed for the quiet, for the possibility of healing. But each passing day made me more and more aware that this place was hiding something dark. The longer I stayed at the farm, the more the unspoken rules became evident, and they seemed to shape every moment of life here. At first, I assumed these rules were just eccentricities, quirks of an isolated community. But as time went on, I began to realize that they were not simply habits or traditions. They were deeply embedded in the fabric of this place, and they held a power far beyond what I could comprehend. The first rule I encountered was the most unsettling of all. You never question the silence. Every evening after dinner, there would be a period of profound silence that lasted for at least an hour. The whole farm would fall into this eerie quiet, as if the entire place had been frozen in time. Nobody spoke, not even a whisper. The silence wasn't just a lack of sound. It was oppressive, like the air itself had thickened, making it impossible to even think clearly. if you spoke. Even by accident, you would be met with stares, sharp, intense, as though you had just broken a sacred law. I had learned quickly that asking questions was another rule that could not be broken. At first, I thought it was merely a formality, but I soon realized that it was far more serious than that. The few times I attempted to ask about the history of the farm or about the people who lived here, the responses were vague and dismissive. I was told, "We follow the rules to keep things peaceful," or "some things are better left untouched." But the more I pressed, the colder and more distant the answers became. One day I asked the caretaker, an elderly woman named Clara, why the silence was so strict, and she simply looked at me, her face emotionless, and replied, "The silence keeps us safe." That was all. No explanation, no further discussion. But there was a deeper rule, one that was even more sinister: never leave the property after sunset. This rule wasn't explicitly stated, but everyone here knew it. I had witnessed the people of the farm retreat to their cabins as the sun dipped below the horizon, never venturing outside after dark. I asked Clara about it one evening when curiosity got the better of me. She hesitated, then said, "It's safer here. Outside after dark, things are not as they seem." Her eyes darted nervously, and her lips trembled as if she wanted to say more, but couldn't. It was clear that there was something terrifying beyond the boundary of the farm once night fell. As I continued to observe, it became clear that these rules were not just for maintaining order, they were life or death. Anyone who broke them seemed to disappear, or worse, change in ways I couldn't explain. I saw a man, someone I had worked with in the fields, look another worker in the eye for too long. The next day he was gone. At first, I thought he had just left, but the people here didn't speak of him, and his belongings were still in his cabin. No one acknowledged his absence. The farm had a way of erasing people, making their presence fade into nothingness, as if they had never existed at all. And then there was the most chilling rule of all: you never question the leader. The leader, known only as Father, was a figure who loomed over the farm with an air of authority that bordered on the divine. He was the one who set the rules, who spoke when necessary, but always in riddles. The people here revered him, almost as if he were a god. His word was absolute, and it was said that breaking his commands would bring ruin upon the entire farm. I had never seen him in person until one night when I was summoned to meet him. Father's presence was overwhelming. He was tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through you. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was a force behind it that made your skin prickle. "You are here for a reason, Emily," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "You must understand that the rules are not here to trap you, they are here to protect you." His words felt like a warning, but also like an invitation. I wasn't sure what he meant, but I could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air long after he had left. The more I tried to understand these rules, the more I realized how deeply ingrained they were in the very nature of the farm. The rules controlled every aspect of life here, from how we spoke to where we went to what we ate. It was as if the people of this place had given up their free will in exchange for something powerful and terrifying, but no one dared ask what that something was. I began to feel trapped, caught in a web of unspoken agreements that I didn't fully understand. My initial sense of peace was now overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. The silence, the rules, the mysterious lighter, they all seemed to serve a purpose I wasn't yet able to grasp. And with each passing day, I began to fear that if I didn't follow the rules, I might disappear just like the others. But the most terrifying thought of all was that I might be too far gone already to escape. This place, this farm, wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a trap, and I was beginning to wonder if I would ever make it out alive. At first, I tried my best to blend in, following the rules without question, but the oppressive silence and strange rituals began to wear on me. The days grew longer, the nights colder, and I felt a creeping unease building inside me. I had come to this place seeking peace, but instead I found myself haunted by a sense of deep isolation. It wasn't just the loneliness that gnawed at me, it was the feeling that something was terribly wrong, something hidden beneath the surface, just waiting to be uncovered. I began to feel suffocated, like I was losing myself in the quiet, in the endless cycle of monotonous tasks and unspoken laws. The farm, with its eerie calm, became a cage, and I was its prisoner. The more I followed the rules, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, as if I were becoming a part of something I didn't understand. I started to question why I was here. Was it truly to find peace? Or was I just another pawn in a game I wasn't aware of? One evening, as I sat in my cabin after another long day of work, I found myself staring at the window, the dark forest outside whispering its secrets. The silence was unbearable, pressing in on me like a heavy weight. It was then that I heard something, a faint rustling outside my door. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or perhaps one of the farm animals, but then I heard it again, closer this time. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a wave of panic washed over me. I knew better than to ignore it. I had seen what happened to people who broke the rules, who acted out of line. But something inside me, some deep, restless part, urged me to find out what was happening outside. I hesitated for a moment, the rules of the farm echoing in my mind. Never leave after dark, never question the silence. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what was happening. My heart pounded in my chest as I slipped out of the cabin, the cold night air biting at my skin. The moon was high, casting long shadows over the ground, but the farm was eerily still. It was as though the entire place was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. I crept through the yard, trying to stay hidden in the shadows until I reached the edge of the forest. The trees loomed ahead, dark and silent. I could hear the rustling again. But this time it wasn't just the wind. It was too deliberate, too rhythmic. I moved closer, my heart racing. And then I saw it. In the clearing ahead, a group of people was gathered. Their faces were obscured in the shadows, but I recognized them as members of the farm. They were standing in a circle, their hands raised in the air as if they were conducting some kind of ritual. A chill ran down my spine as I watched them move in unison, their bodies swaying with the rhythm of an unseen force. The air was thick with tension, and for a moment I thought I could hear whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to rise and fall with the breeze. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run back to my cabin, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but the other part of me, the part that had been silently questioning everything since I arrived, couldn't tear my eyes away. This was a side of the farm I had never seen before, a side that was hidden, forbidden, a side that terrified me. As I stood there, frozen in place, I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the people in the circle, an older man I had seen working in the fields, stepped forward. In his hands he held a small, ornate object. It gleamed in the moonlight, and for a brief moment I thought it was a knife. The group fell silent, their eyes fixed on the object. The air grew thick, heavy, as if the very earth beneath my feet was holding its breath. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, my footsteps crunching in the dry leaves beneath me. My mind raced, my heart pounding as I stumbled back toward my cabin. The images from the clearing flashed through my mind, the ritual, the whispers, the object. I knew that I had just witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see, something dark, something that went against everything the farm had told me. But I also knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had crossed a line. The rules had been broken, and now there was no turning back. I spent the rest of the night lying in bed, my mind racing, my body trembling. I couldn't shake the image of that ritual from my mind, nor the feeling that I was in way over my head. The next day I kept my distance, not daring to ask any questions, not wanting to draw attention to myself. But the seed had been planted. I knew that there were things happening on this farm that no one was talking about, things far darker than I could ever imagine. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the only way I would ever find out what was truly going on here was to keep pushing, keep questioning, and keep breaking the rules, even if it meant risking everything. The next few days passed in a blur of unease and suspicion. Every glance, every whispered conversation seemed to carry a hidden meaning, something just out of reach. I had broken the first rule. I had looked beyond the surface of this place, and now I couldn't turn back. I couldn't unsee what I had witnessed in the woods that night. But as much as I wanted answers, I felt the weight of the farm's rules pressing down on me more than ever. It was as though the farm itself was watching, waiting for me to make another mistake. The people here were still distant, and the silence between them felt thicker than ever. They went about their daily tasks, but there was a strange tension in the air, a subtle shift that made it harder to breathe. I wasn't the only one who had noticed something off about the farm. There were others too, people who seemed to be watching the walls close in around them, their faces tight with fear and uncertainty. One person in particular caught my attention, John, a man in his late 40s who had been working on the farm for as long as anyone could remember. He was a quiet man, but unlike the others, there was something in his eyes that told me he knew more than he let on. He often worked alone in the fields, his movements deliberate and slow, as though he was always waiting for something. I had tried speaking to him a few times, but he had always been distant, offering short answers or simply walking away when I asked anything more than necessary. But after that night in the woods, I felt like I needed to talk to him. Something in his gaze told me he knew exactly what was happening here, and I had a gut feeling that he might be the key to understanding the truth. I waited until after dinner, when most of the others had retreated to their cabins for the evening silence. I found him near the edge of the fields, just standing there, looking out at the horizon. The moonlight cast long shadows over his weathered face. "John," I called softly, stepping toward him, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know, what's going on here? What is this place?" For a moment, he didn't answer. He just stood there, his back stiff, his hands clenched at his sides. Then finally, he turned toward me, his eyes narrow and wary. "You shouldn't be asking those questions," he said quietly, his voice low and rough. "Trust me, you don't want to know the answers. Not here, not now. But I need to know," I insisted. "I've seen things. I can't just ignore it anymore." John looked around, his eyes darting nervously as though making sure no one else was listening. He stepped closer, his voice even quieter now. "Listen to me," he said, almost pleading. "This place, it's not what it seems. The rules aren't just for keeping things in order. They're for keeping us in line. The people here, they follow them because they have to. Breaking them is more than just dangerous. It's life-changing." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. John sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to know, but once you've been here long enough, you start to see the patterns. People disappear. They're never talked about again. It's like they never existed, but I've seen the truth and I can't ignore it anymore." "Disappeared," I echoed. "What do you mean by that?" John's eyes flicked nervously toward the farmhouses. "There's a price to be paid for breaking the rules," he whispered. "And some of us, we've been part of this for too long, but the newcomers, the ones like you, they don't see it. They just see the peace, the quiet, the simplicity. But behind it all, there's something far darker, something that keeps this farm running." I felt my heart race. The tension in his voice was palpable, and his words hung in the air like a shadow I couldn't escape. "You have to be careful," John continued, stepping even closer, his face grim. "I know you're looking for answers, but you have to understand, there are things here that nobody dares speak about. Things that, if you're not careful, will swallow you whole. They've swallowed others before." "What are they?" I asked, almost desperate to know, but before he could respond, I heard footsteps approaching in the distance. John's expression shifted, and in that moment, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before: fear. "Go back to your cabin, Emily," he said urgently. "Now, if you value your life, you'll leave it alone. You've already seen too much." Before I could ask him anything else, he turned and walked quickly away, vanishing into the darkening fields. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing, my thoughts in turmoil. What had I just learned? What had I just uncovered? I knew that whatever John had tried to warn me about, it was only the beginning. I returned to my cabin in a daze, the weight of John's words heavy on my shoulders. He had made it clear that I was treading on dangerous ground, too dangerous, but it wasn't in me to walk away, not now. If there was one thing I had learned about myself, it was that I couldn't live with unanswered questions. And now I had more questions than ever. Who were these people? Why were they here? And what exactly were the rules protecting them from? I didn't know the answers, but I was beginning to suspect that I was about to find out. The tension that hung in the air that night was unlike anything I had felt before. After my conversation with John, I couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse than I had imagined was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The farm, with its seemingly perfect routine, wasn't just a place to escape, it was a prison, and we were all its unwilling occupants. The next morning, I woke up to the usual quiet of the farm. The sun had barely risen, and the farm was already alive with activity, people moving from one task to the next without a word spoken. I felt the weight of the silence even more intensely today. The sound of the wind through the trees outside the window seemed deafening in the absence of conversation. I couldn't get John's warnings out of my head, nor could I ignore the feeling that something was very, very wrong. As the day wore on, I tried to go about my usual work, feeding the animals, tending to the crops, but my mind kept drifting back to that strange ritual I had witnessed in the woods. The sight of those people gathered in the clearing, their movements synchronized, the ominous object held in the hands of the man who led the circle. The whispers, the eerie stillness of it all, it haunted me. I had to know what was happening. I had to understand what they were doing out there in the dark. Around midday, I decided to take a risk. I would return to the woods, see if I could uncover more of the mystery that seemed to surround the farm. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground, but the woods felt darker, as if the trees themselves were hiding something. I waited until the farm had settled into its rhythm, everyone busy with their tasks, before slipping away unnoticed. My heart raced as I moved deeper into the forest, trying to stay quiet, my senses on high alert. I reached the clearing again, and this time, I wasn't alone. There was a figure standing in the middle of the circle. It was Father, the leader of the farm, the man who everyone seemed to revere. His eyes were closed, his arms stretched wide as though he was absorbing the energy around him. The other members of the farm were gathered around him in the same circle, their faces pale and emotionless, as if they were all under some sort of trance. I hid behind a tree, holding my breath, trying to stay out of sight. But the longer I watched, the more I realized that they weren't just performing some sort of ritual. They were calling something ancient and powerful. The air around them seemed to hum with an energy I couldn't understand, an unseen force pressing down on the very ground beneath my feet. It was as if the earth itself was reacting to their actions. And in that moment, I knew this was no ordinary farm. Father's voice broke through the eerie silence, his words low but firm. Like a chant, the others repeated after him, their voices soft but united. It was a language I didn't recognize, ancient and foreign, vibrating in the air like a summons. The object the man had been holding earlier appeared again, glowing faintly, casting an eerie light over the group. I felt my breath catch in my throat. What were they doing? What had I stumbled upon? Then something happened that made my blood run cold. Father stopped chanting, his eyes snapping open. And for the briefest of moments, his gaze met mine. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. His eyes were dark, hollow, and there was a sinister knowing in them that made my heart skip a beat. I froze, praying I hadn't been seen, but I knew deep down that he had. He was aware of my presence, and I could feel the weight of that awareness hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Without warning, the group scattered, retreating into the woods, vanishing as if they had never been there. I stood there, stunned, unable to move for a few moments, the weight of what I had just witnessed settling heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. What were they summoning? What was Father involved in? I didn't have answers, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary farm, and Father was no ordinary leader. The rules weren't just about keeping order. They were about keeping something in check, something dangerous. Something that they were feeding, nurturing, and keeping alive. I stumbled back to the farm, my mind reeling, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked past the other workers, I couldn't help but wonder, had they seen the same thing? Did they know what was happening? Or were they just as trapped in this strange, suffocating world as I was? I didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain. I was no longer just an observer. I was part of something much bigger and much darker than I had ever imagined, and now there was no way to turn back. The days after that night felt surreal, as if the farm itself had shifted into something unrecognizable. My every step was weighed down by the knowledge that I had seen something I wasn't meant to see. The farm was no longer a place of refuge or peace. It was a place of control, and now I knew the price of disobedience. I could no longer ignore the chilling implications of what I had witnessed. Father, the leader of this strange community, wasn't just a figurehead. He was a key to something far darker, something ancient and dangerous. The rituals, the rules, the unspoken laws, all of them were part of a much larger and more terrifying purpose. But what was the purpose? What were they summoning and why? What role did I play in this twisted game? It wasn't long before I found the answer, though not in the way I expected. One morning, as I worked in the fields, I caught sight of John. He was walking alone. His back hunched as if he were burdened by a heavy weight. It was clear he was carrying something important, and I couldn't help but feel that he knew more than he had let on. I had seen him react to my questions before, his eyes full of warning and fear, but now I was certain that he knew the truth. Without thinking, I walked toward him, my heart racing. "John, I need to know what's really going on here," I said, my voice low. "I've seen things. Things I don't understand. I need answers." John stopped in his tracks, his hand tightening around the bundle he was carrying. For a moment, I thought he would walk away again, but then, to my surprise, he turned to face me. His face was pale, and his eyes, usually cold and distant, were now full of something I couldn't place: dread. "You don't understand, Emily," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "You've seen too much already. It's not just the rules. It's what the rules protect. The farm is a vessel, and it's not just for us, it's for something else. Something that has been waiting for a long time." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "A vessel for what?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. John hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around. "I shouldn't be saying this, but you need to know. The farm wasn't built just for us to live. It was built to contain. It holds something ancient, something alive. Something that thrives on the silence, on the obedience, on the rituals. And Father, he's not just leading us, he's feeding it." I stared at him, unable to comprehend his words. "Feeding it? What do you mean?" John looked over his shoulder again before speaking, his voice dropping lower. "Father, he is the keeper. The rituals, the rules, everything, they're not just about control, they're sacrifices. They feed this thing, keep it alive, and it grows stronger with every day that passes. It needs our energy, our fear, our compliance. The moment we stop following the rules, it starts to awaken. And once it does, it's unstoppable. People disappear, not because they leave, but because they're taken, consumed by it. You've seen what happens to those who break the rules. They don't just vanish, they're fed to it." I felt my stomach churn. "What is it? What is this thing?" John shook his head, his voice growing more desperate. "I don't know, but it's been here long before any of us. The farm was built around it, and it's been waiting, dormant for years. Father found it somehow, and he made a deal with it. We follow the rules, feed it, and it keeps us safe. But if we break the rules, if we stop feeding it, it wakes up. And when it does, it doesn't just kill, it consumes everything. It takes us." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just some strange, isolated community with weird customs. This was a cult, a sacrifice, and I had unknowingly become part of it. I had crossed a line, and now I was tied to this place in a way I couldn't escape. "But why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why would anyone want to feed something like that? Why would Father do this?" John looked at me with a mixture of sadness and fear. "Because he has no choice. None of us do. This place, the farm, it's a prison, and the rules are the bars that keep us alive. No one can leave. Not unless they're willing to give up everything they have, including their souls." A silence hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of his words. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. This whole place was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion designed to trap us, to feed something older than time itself. "What happens if I leave?" I asked, my voice shaky with fear and defiance. "What if I break the rules?" John's face paled further, and for the first time, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. "You can't leave, Emily. You think you can just walk away. No one ever leaves if you break the rules. If you try to escape, it will take you. It won't let you go, and when it's done with you, there won't be anything left." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of his words sank in. This wasn't just about surviving the farm. It was about surviving the thing that lived within it, the thing that ruled everything from the shadows. I had never felt so trapped, so small, so powerless. The rules weren't just strange, they were life and death, and now I knew. The real question wasn't how to break free from the farm. It was whether I could survive the thing that called this place home. As I walked back to my cabin, the weight of what I had learned settled on me like a stone. I wasn't just living here anymore. I was part of something much darker, much more dangerous, and I didn't know how long I could keep playing along before it was too late. The days that followed my conversation with John were a blur of confusion and fear. I tried to go about my daily tasks, pretending to follow the rules, but every step felt heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The more I thought about what John had said, the more I realized how deep I was in, how trapped I was. The silence that had once seemed peaceful now felt suffocating. The rules that everyone followed without question were no longer just strange, they were life or death. The weight of it all was too much to ignore. I watched the others closely, looking for signs that they knew the truth too, but they were all just as compliant as ever, moving through their routines without question, as though nothing had changed. It was as though they had all accepted their fate long ago, choosing to live in ignorance of the horror that lurked beneath the surface. It made me wonder, were they really blind to it, or had they simply given up? Then, one evening, the unthinkable happened. I had been working in the barn, feeding the animals, when I saw a figure standing by the edge of the field, staring toward the forest. It was Lily, a young woman who had arrived at the farm only a few months before me. She was quiet, reserved, just like everyone else, but there was something different about her. She was the only one who ever seemed to hesitate, like she was always on the edge of asking something, but never did. That night, she had broken one of the rules. She had looked someone in the eyes for too long. It wasn't even intentional, but I saw it happen. As I walked past her, I noticed she was staring intently at one of the older men who worked the farm. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his face tightening. But Lily didn't look away. Her gaze was fixed, almost like she was trying to understand something that had been bothering her for a long time. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, and I could feel a palpable tension building in the air, like the farm itself was holding its breath. I tried to turn away, but before I could reach the door, I heard it. A loud, piercing sound, like a shriek that echoed through the fields. I froze, my blood running cold. It didn't come from Lily, it came from the very earth beneath us, as though the ground itself had been disturbed by her gaze. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. Lily's eyes were wide, her face pale. She looked terrified. The older man turned away quickly, his face expressionless, as though nothing had happened. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving Lily standing there, trembling. I couldn't look away. I knew what I had just witnessed. She had broken the rule. I waited, hoping the silence would return to normal, but it didn't. There was something off in the air now. It was as if the tension had shifted. The farm, once so still and calm, now felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. I wanted to go to Lily, to comfort her, to ask her what had happened, but I knew better. No one was supposed to question what they saw, and no one was supposed to break the silence. That night I stayed up late, unable to sleep. Every creak of the wooden walls, every gust of wind outside felt like a warning. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. What happened to Lily after that? Was she going to disappear like the others? Or worse, would she be taken by the thing that the farm had been hiding all these years? I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was about to pay a price for her curiosity. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I had to know what happened to her, and I had to find out what this place was really hiding. If the rules here had a price, then I was ready to pay it, because I knew that if I didn't, I would never leave this place, alive at least. When I went outside, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the land. It was quieter than usual, and the people went about their work with a strange, almost mechanical routine. I glanced over at Lily's cabin, but it was empty. She was gone. I wanted to scream, to run after her, but something inside me told me that she was never coming back. The rules had been broken, and now the consequences had begun. The silence on the farm had become unbearable. After Lily's disappearance, the farm seemed to retreat even further into its shell, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something. The people, the workers, all carried on as usual, but there was a heaviness in the air that hadn't been there before. I knew that something had changed, not just on the surface, but deep within the very essence of this place. It was as though the farm itself had been disturbed, and whatever was hidden in the shadows was beginning to stir. I had never felt so alone. The night after Lily disappeared, I stayed awake, my mind whirling. I couldn't shake the image of her wide eyes, the terror etched across her face as she had stared into that man's eyes. It wasn't just a rule broken, it was something deeper, something dangerous. The rules were not merely for order, they were the only thing standing between us and something far more terrifying. I thought about John's warnings, about the way he had spoken in hushed tones, urging me to stay away from the truth. The farm was not what it seemed. It wasn't just a place of isolation, it was a trap, a place where we were all caught in the web of a sinister pact. And now Lily was gone, swallowed by that very pact. I couldn't let this go. I had to find out what happened to her, and I had to learn the truth about this farm, whether I was ready for it or not. The next day, I couldn't focus. My tasks were performed mechanically, my thoughts consumed by one question: what was really happening here? Why did the farm need such strict rules? What was the thing that the rules were keeping in check? As the sun began to set, I found myself at the edge of the woods again, standing where I had seen Lily the night before. The air felt different tonight, thicker, colder. The wind carried a faint scent, not of earth or trees, but something darker, something decaying. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was watching me. I moved deeper into the woods, following the path that led to the clearing. The rituals, the group, Father, all of it circled back to this place. I knew I couldn't stay on the farm any longer without knowing what was truly going on. If I didn't uncover the truth, if I didn't take the risk, I'd end up like Lily, another ghost, another forgotten soul swallowed by the farm. As I reached the clearing, I stopped. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the ground, and for a moment, everything was still. There was no movement, no sounds of life, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. But then I heard it, the faintest whisper, like the wind carrying a voice. I strained to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice grew louder, clearer, until it was no longer a whisper but a low murmur, coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. I couldn't tell if it was real or if my mind was playing tricks on me, but I felt a pull, an overwhelming compulsion to follow it. The path twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the forest, further than I had ever gone before. The trees grew taller, their branches weaving together to form an impenetrable canopy above me. The darkness here was suffocating. My instincts told me to turn back, to run, but my curiosity overpowered my fear. And then I saw it. In the center of the woods, far away from the clearing, there was a stone altar. It was ancient, covered in vines and moss, as though it had been abandoned for centuries. But it wasn't abandoned, not by the people of the farm. They had come here and they had used it. As I stepped closer, I could see faint marks etched into the stone, symbols that seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. They were worn, faded, but still visible, as though they had been carved by someone or something, trying to mark its territory. I knew instantly that these were not just random markings. They were ritualistic symbols, the kind that John had spoken of. And then the voice returned. This time it wasn't in the wind, it was inside my head. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, low and menacing. "You've seen too much. You've already broken the rules." I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Father was standing there, his figure barely visible in the darkness, watching me. His presence was suffocating, like a shadow that stretched across the entire forest. "What is this place?" I demanded, my voice shaky but defiant. "What is happening here? Why are you all doing this?" Father stepped closer, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. His voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was a coldness to it that sent a chill down my spine. "You think you've uncovered something, Emily, but you don't understand. This place was never meant to be understood. It is a part of something ancient, something powerful. The rules, they keep it dormant, they keep it at bay. But you," he paused, as if savoring the moment, "you have awakened it." I took a step back, fear gripping my chest. "What is it? What is this thing you've been feeding?" Father's smile was twisted, his eyes dark with an intensity I had never seen before. "It is not a thing, Emily. It is the life force of this farm. It was here long before us, long before this land was cultivated. We feed it, we obey it, and in return it keeps us safe. But now that you've seen the truth, there is no going back." The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting, as though the earth itself was reacting to Father's words. I felt something move in the shadows, something alive, and it was closing in on me. "You should have stayed ignorant," Father said softly. "But now you are part of it. You are part of the sacrifice." Before I could react, the ground trembled beneath my feet and the trees around me began to sway. The voice in my head grew louder, more urgent, as if it were trying to claim me. And in that moment, I understood. The farm wasn't just a place of rituals. It was a living entity, and I had just become its next offering. I turned and ran, my heart pounding, the sounds of the forest closing in around me. I had learned too much, and now I was going to have to fight for my life. The night air felt thick with something oppressive as I stumbled through the forest, my feet barely touching the ground. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the trees closing in on me, but I couldn't stop. I had to get away. The forest was no longer just a series of trees and paths. It was a maze, a living, breathing entity that seemed to pulse with every step I took. The whispers in my head were deafening, echoing with the sound of something ancient, something powerful, that I had unknowingly stirred into action. The ground trembled beneath me as if the earth itself was shaking with the presence of whatever I had woken up in this cursed place. I wasn't just running from father or from the farm's rules. I was running from whatever dark force was behind it all. From the thing that had been waiting, dormant for so long, fed by obedience, silence, and sacrifice. I couldn't breathe. The panic surged in my chest, my lungs struggling to fill with air. Every branch seemed to snap underfoot. Every whisper seemed louder, closer, like the very woods were alive and watching me, waiting for me to break. And I did. I screamed. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My voice, hoarse and raw, ripped through the silence that had settled over the farm for so long. I screamed for help, screamed for freedom, screamed for my own survival. The moment the sound left my throat, I felt it, the shift. The atmosphere around me snapped, and a cold wind swept through the trees, making the leaves rustle violently. I stopped dead in my tracks, my body stiff, frozen in place. I had broken the silence. I glanced around, heart racing, but all I saw was the dark expanse of the forest closing in on me, the shadows shifting with something I couldn't quite see. The silence, which had been so stifling before, was now replaced by a soundless pressure, a weight I couldn't shake off. It was as if the very forest itself was waiting, biding its time. And then I heard the footsteps. They were slow at first, deliberate, rhythmic, the unmistakable sound of boots crunching against the earth. Father had followed me. He was close. I turned to run again, but my feet felt heavy, like I was wading through thick mud. The air was thick with a foul scent, a mixture of decaying leaves and something metallic like blood. I stumbled, nearly falling, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The primal urge to flee had overridden everything else. But just as I reached the edge of the clearing, I felt a cold hand grip my arm. Father. He had caught up to me, his grip strong and unyielding, his fingers like iron around my wrist. I spun around, meeting his cold, dark gaze. "You should have stayed silent, Emily," he said, his voice low and full of a chilling calmness. "You think running will change anything. You think breaking the rules will save you. It's too late for that." His words sliced through me like a knife. I had always known, deep down, that breaking the rules would have consequences. But hearing him say it so matter-of-factly made everything feel even more real. This place, the farm, wasn't just a place of rules and rituals. It was alive, and now the consequences were here. I pulled away from him, struggling, but his hand tightened. His gaze never wavered. "You can't run from it," he whispered, almost in pity. "There is nowhere left to run." I felt a pulse of fear shoot through me. My mind raced. What was he talking about? Was he talking about the farm, or was he talking about the thing he had warned me about? The thing that had been waiting for so long, the force that was connected to the farm, the one that fed on silence, fear, and compliance. And then I heard it, a low rumble like the growl of some unseen beast coming from deep within the woods. I froze. What was that? Father's smile faded, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. He released his grip on me, stepping back slowly. "It's coming," he muttered. "It's awake." I didn't need another explanation. I turned and ran again, desperate, my legs moving faster than they ever had before. But the rumbling grew louder, closer, and I could feel the ground beneath me start to shift, the very earth trembling as if it were alive, as if it were reacting to the force that had been awakened. I reached the edge of the clearing, but the forest didn't seem to open up anymore. It was as if the woods had grown thicker, like it was swallowing the path ahead. The trees closed in around me and the shadows grew darker. Suddenly, the world around me felt like it was closing in, squeezing me into a small space, trapping me. The air was thick with dread. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I glanced over my shoulder and I saw it. A figure, dark, tall, and shifting, emerged from the trees. It wasn't Father. It wasn't a person at all. It was something other, something beyond human, something ancient. Its form was distorted, like smoke or shadow, flickering and twisting as it moved. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My legs felt frozen to the ground, my body paralyzed by the thing's presence. It was the force, the one that had been kept hidden, the one that had been fed by the rules, by the silence. As it stepped closer, the ground beneath me seemed to crack, the earth splitting open, sending a shock of terror through my entire body. The trees around me groaned and shifted, as if the forest itself was bending and breaking under its power. It was awake, and there was nothing left to stop it. The world around me seemed to collapse as the darkness, the thing, inched closer. I could feel it, like a wave of cold terror washing over me, pulling me into its grasp. The forest, the farm, everything that had once seemed familiar now felt alien, twisted, and suffocating. The ground beneath my feet seemed to move like it was alive, shifting with each step I took. The trees bent at unnatural angles, their branches reaching out like fingers, closing in on me. And in the distance, the low, growling hum of the entity grew louder, a sound that vibrated in my bones and rattled my soul. I knew then that there was no escape. The rules of the farm had been there to keep us obedient, to keep us quiet, to feed this thing. But now the price had come due. The silence had kept it dormant, and my breaking of the rules, my screaming, had been the catalyst. Now it was awake, and it wasn't just the farm, it was everywhere. I stumbled backward, my legs weak beneath me, my mind racing, trying to comprehend what was happening. But there was no time for logic, no time to think. I could feel the force of the thing's presence, pressing in from all sides, its power radiating through the air. Then I saw Father again. He was standing near the edge of the clearing, watching the scene unfold, his face a mask of resignation. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there as if he had seen this happen before. The fear in his eyes was palpable, but there was something else there too, guilt, remorse. "You have to understand, Emily," he said softly, his voice carrying through the chaos. "This is the only way. We had to feed it. We had to give it what it wanted, or it would have consumed us all. You knew this was going to happen." I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear and anger. "You knew this was what it was all along, and you let it happen. You let it feed on us." Father's face twisted in sorrow. "You think I had a choice? The farm, the rules, the rituals, they were all part of an agreement. We feed it, we obey it, and it lets us live. But now," he looked at the dark entity creeping toward us, and the hopelessness in his eyes was undeniable. "Now it's too late. The thing, the force, the entity was almost upon us. I could see its shape more clearly now, the swirling darkness, the endless shifting tendrils of shadow that seemed to dissolve and reappear in the air like smoke. It had no true form, no solid body, just an overwhelming presence of power and hunger. I took a step back, my heart racing, but Father didn't move. He stood rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on the approaching entity. He knew something I didn't. He knew that there was no escaping it. "Emily," Father said, his voice breaking through my panic. "There's one last rule, one last choice." "What choice?" I demanded, my voice rising in desperation. Father's eyes softened. "If you can survive the next few minutes, if you can outlast it, it may let you go. But you must break the final rule. You must sacrifice yourself to it." My blood ran cold. "Sacrifice? What are you talking about? The sacrifice isn't about obedience anymore. It's about feeding it, yes, but more than that. It wants something from you. You are the one who broke the silence. You are the one who brought it out, and now it needs you." A wave of nausea hit me. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but my body was frozen in place. The air was thick with the thing's presence, and I could barely breathe. I had to act. I turned toward the entity, my heart pounding, my mind a whirl of thoughts. I could feel the power of it, the pressure building around me, the oppressive darkness that threatened to swallow everything whole. But I wasn't ready to give in, not without a fight. I would not be its offering. I reached deep inside myself, trying to find something to hold on to, something that would give me strength. I thought of everything that had brought me to this point, my parents, my lost life, my broken past. I thought of Lily, who had disappeared without a trace. I thought of everyone who had ever been taken by this place, by this creature. And then a thought pierced through the chaos. The rules. The rules had been keeping it at bay, feeding it, but they had never been the true power. The true power was choice, free will. The thing fed on our fear, on our obedience. But it was ultimately dependent on our willingness to comply. I didn't have to feed it. I could break the final rule. I could choose not to obey. Without thinking, I turned and ran. I ran as fast as my legs would carry me, pushing through the thick underbrush, the shadows stretching out around me. The thing screamed, a high-pitched wail that seemed to vibrate through the very air, and I could feel it chasing me, its presence a weight on my chest, pulling me backward. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to survive. I ran until my lungs burned, until the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. But just as I thought I couldn't go any farther, I stumbled into a clearing. For the first time since I had arrived on this farm, I could see the stars. The sky above was dark and vast, a sea of pinpricks of light. I had made it out of the woods, but I wasn't safe yet. I could still hear the rumbling growl, the unsettling screech of the entity, still echoing through the trees. But it was farther away now. It was retreating. I had broken the rule and I had survived. For now, But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It would come for me again, and next time I wouldn't have the luxury of a second chance. The night had become my enemy. The deep, oppressive silence of the farm was now a distant memory, replaced by the chaotic echoes of my own heartbeat, the wild pounding of my breath in the dark woods. I had broken the final rule, I had defied the entity, and yet there was no comfort in my victory. I could feel it lingering, that dark force, the one that fed on silence, on fear, on obedience. It wasn't gone, it was still there, watching, waiting. I had run as far as I could, but the farm still held its grip on me. There was nowhere to hide, there was nowhere safe. I stumbled through the forest, each step taking me further away from the farm, but somehow it felt like I wasn't leaving at all. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly, as if the woods were designed to trap me, to hold me within its dark embrace. The hours passed, but I didn't know how long I had been running. My legs were sore, my body drained, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't give up, not yet, not when I was so close to the truth. Eventually, I found my way back to the farm, though I couldn't explain how or why. The landscape around me had changed, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make me feel like I had been drawn back by some unseen force. The shadows clung to the edges of the fields, and the wind had picked up, howling through the trees with a wild ferocity that made my skin crawl. The farm loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the evening sky. I couldn't go back inside, couldn't face the same silence. But something inside me, the part that had broken free, the part that had fought back against the entity, urged me forward. The answers were here. The farm had been hiding them from me, and now it was time to expose the truth. I crept back toward the farmhouse, barely making a sound as I moved through the grass. The windows were dark, the farm still. But I knew there was something more happening inside, something that had to be discovered. I moved to the back of the house, where I knew there was a small cellar, a place that had always seemed out of place in this isolated farm. I had seen it only once, but the memory of it stuck with me. There was something down there, something I had been too afraid to ask about, something hidden. The door to the cellar was locked, but I didn't hesitate. I pulled a rusted key from my pocket, the one I had stolen from the main house a few days earlier, and forced it into the lock. The door creaked open slowly, and a chill ran down my spine. I was stepping into the unknown, into the place where everything, the truth, had been kept from me. The air inside the cellar was damp, heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. The wooden steps creaked under my weight as I descended into the darkness. The dim light from the moon above barely filtered through the small window at the top, leaving me in a cloak of shadow. I could barely make out the shapes around me, but I didn't need to see to know what I was walking into. I could feel it, the presence, the unease that had permeated the farm from the moment I arrived. I made my way to the back of the cellar, where there was a hidden door. It wasn't obvious, but I had seen it once during my brief exploration of the farm. The door was different from the rest. There was a strange symbol carved into the wood, something I recognized from the ritual markings. I reached out and pushed it open. The room beyond was small, but it was unlike anything I had seen before. There was a stone altar in the center, covered in ancient symbols and strange markings. The air was thick, suffocating with the same unnatural energy I had felt during the rituals in the woods. And on the altar was a book, its pages yellowed with age, its cover adorned with strange patterns that I couldn't make sense of. It looked ancient, as though it had been here for centuries, waiting for someone to find it. As I stepped closer to the altar, a low hum filled the room. It wasn't a sound I could hear with my ears, but something deeper, a vibration that resonated within my chest. I reached out, touching the book. The moment my fingers made contact, the hum grew louder, more intense, as if the farm itself was responding to my actions. I hesitated for a moment, but then opened the book. Inside, the pages were filled with more of the same markings I had seen on the altar and in the woods, ritualistic symbols, patterns that made no sense. But then I came across something different, a diagram. It was a map, a crude sketch of the farm with a large, dark circle drawn around the center. And in the center of that circle was the symbol I had seen Father use during the ritual. There was a passage beneath the diagram, written in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow I understood it. The words felt like they were embedded in my mind, whispering to me, imploring me to listen. They spoke of an ancient power, something that had existed long before the farm, long before the people who had come to it. The farm was built on a foundation of dark energy, and the rituals were a way of maintaining control over it. The entity, the force that had been waiting for so long, it wasn't just a creature. It was a god, a being of pure darkness, and the farm was its prison. I felt my heart race as the truth sank in. The farm wasn't just feeding it, it was sustaining it, keeping it bound to the land, keeping it alive. And every rule, every ritual was a way of controlling the entity, of preventing it from breaking free. But now, with the rules broken, the entity had been awakened, and it wouldn't stop until it had consumed everything. I slammed the book shut, my mind reeling with the implications. The air around me seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. I had unleashed it, and now I had to find a way to stop it before it destroyed everything. I raced up the stairs, the book clutched tightly in my hands. I had learned too much. But now I had to face the consequences. The thing wasn't just a force of nature, it was alive, and if I didn't act quickly, it would take everything. I was no longer just trying to escape, I was trying to survive. I didn't have much time. The air around me felt heavier with each passing second, thick with the presence of the entity that had been lurking beneath the farm for centuries. I had broken the final rule, and now I had to face the consequences. The creature was awake, and it was coming for me. I raced back to the center of the farm, my mind a whirlwind of fear and desperation. The book, its pages, the symbols, the ancient energy, it had all led me here to this moment. The rules of the farm had kept the entity contained, but now, with the ritual disturbed, everything was unraveling. The farm's silence, the obedience, the constant adherence to the rules, it had all been a cage, a carefully constructed prison to keep the thing at bay. And now the cage was wide open. I could hear the rumbling in the distance, that same low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the earth. It was getting closer, and I was running out of time. I reached the farmhouse and looked around. The workers were still going about their tasks, oblivious to the chaos that was about to unfold. It was as if they were trapped in a dream, their minds controlled by the force that governed this place. But I couldn't let them stay like this. I couldn't let them be consumed by the thing that had already taken Lily and so many others before her. I ran to the barn where I had seen the altar before. It was there, in the dim light, that I found Father standing in the center of the barn, his back to me. He was muttering something under his breath, his hands raised as if in prayer, as if he was trying to call the entity back, to control it once again. "You're too late," I said, my voice shaking but full of defiance. "It's already awake. The farm, it can't control it anymore." Father turned slowly, his eyes dark and full of something that almost seemed like pity. "You don't understand, Emily. You never understood what this farm was. It's not just a place, it's a sacrifice. We've all been part of it, feeding it, keeping it alive so that we can survive. But now you've broken the rules and there's nothing left to hold it back. I won't let you feed it anymore," I said, stepping closer, my hands trembling. "I won't let you feed this thing. I won't let it destroy everything." Father's face twisted with anger, his expression darkening. "You think you can stop it? You think you can stop it? You've already played your part, Emily. There's no turning back now." I couldn't let him do this. I couldn't let him continue the ritual, continue feeding this ancient force. I had to stop him, had to stop the farm from consuming more lives, from sacrificing more souls. The entity would feed on the fear, the silence, and the obedience, but it didn't have to be this way. We could break the cycle, and it started with me. I grabbed the book from my bag and held it up to him. "This ends tonight. I know what this place is. And I know what you've done. This prison of yours, this is over." Father's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a grin. "You think you can fight it? You can't even fight me. You have no idea what you're dealing with." His words were like venom, designed to break me, to make me doubt myself. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't afraid anymore. The entity, the force that had controlled this farm, it fed on fear, and I would not let it have mine. I stepped forward, raising the book higher, my voice steady but firm. "I choose freedom." With that, I ripped the first page of the book out and threw it into the air. The paper fluttered down, igniting in a burst of blue flame, the flames spreading quickly to the altar that sat in the center of the barn. The fire spread across the floor like a living thing, consuming everything in its path, the heat intense but strangely not burning me. As the flames danced around me, I heard the ground tremble beneath my feet, the rumbling of the entity growing louder, its growl more desperate. It was angry, it was scared. Father's eyes widened in realization. He had seen the flames, but he didn't understand. This wasn't just about the book, the rituals. It was about choice, free will. The power to fight back against the entity had always been in our hands, but we had been too afraid to use it. "You can't do this," Father shouted, stepping forward. "You'll destroy us all." But I wasn't listening to him anymore. The rules had never been about keeping us safe. They were about keeping us compliant, feeding the thing that had controlled us for so long. And now I was breaking them and taking the power back. The flames burned brighter, hotter, and I could feel the entity's presence weakening, its grip on the farm loosening. The walls around me shook, the very foundations of the farm beginning to crack under the weight of the fire. The farm, the altar, the rules, they were all part of a system designed to keep the entity alive, but that system was collapsing. With one final scream, Father lunged toward me, but I stood firm, holding my ground. The flames around me roared to life, growing higher and fiercer until they engulfed the altar completely. The entity screeched in fury, its presence swirling in the air like a vortex, but it was too late. The fire had broken its hold. Father collapsed to his knees, his hands raised in surrender, but I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't let myself pity him. He had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. As the flames began to die down, I felt the weight of the farm lift, the pressure in the air dissipating. The forest that had once been so dark and suffocating seemed to breathe again, the trees standing tall and still, as though they were no longer bound to the entity's power. For the first time since I arrived, I felt the air clear. The silence was gone, replaced by the sounds of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the distant chirp of crickets. The farm was no longer a prison, and I had survived. But even as I stood there, breathing in the cool night air, I knew this was only the beginning. The entity might have been defeated for now, but there was no guarantee it would stay gone forever. The price of breaking the silence had been steep, and I would always carry its weight with me. I turned and walked away from the burning ruins of the farm, knowing that I had made my choice, and that there was no going back. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I had a chance, and I would fight for my freedom, no matter the cost. The night felt different now. The oppressive weight that had hung over the farm for so long had lifted, but in its place, a heavy silence still lingered. The air was clearer, less suffocating, but the emptiness was haunting. I stood at the edge of the once sacred ground, my heart still racing, my mind trying to process the chaos that had unfolded. The farm, the entity, the rituals, all of it had been torn down in an instant, burned away by the flames of defiance. But even as I stood there, the glow of the fire in the distance fading into the night, I knew it wasn't truly over. The force that had ruled this place, the one that fed on obedience, fear, and sacrifice, had been driven back. But what else had it left in its wake? What would happen now that the rules were broken, the balance shattered? As the smoke from the burning farm curled into the night sky, I walked away, leaving behind the remnants of the life I had known. The sound of my footsteps was the only thing I could hear, no longer muffled by the silence that had once dominated the air. I kept walking, the path ahead uncertain, my thoughts in turmoil. I had chosen to fight, to defy the unspoken rules of the farm, and somehow I had survived. But I couldn't escape the feeling that the darkness I had unleashed wasn't fully gone. It had merely been pushed back for now. I reached the edge of the forest where the trees began to thin, and the distant lights of civilization flickered on the horizon. I couldn't stay here, in the place where it had all begun. I had to move forward, away from the farm, away from the rules that had controlled me, and away from the shadow of the thing that had nearly consumed us all. But where would I go? I had no home left. The life I had known was gone, and though the farm had been a prison, it had also been the only place I had ever known for months. I had become lost in it, trapped by its rituals and its darkness, but now I was free. The question gnawed at me, what was freedom without a place to belong? I didn't know the answer, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stay in the past, not when I was finally free to choose my future. It was then that I heard the voice, a whisper at first, like a distant echo, almost lost in the wind. I turned instinctively, my heart jumping into my throat. Emily. The voice was soft, almost a breeze, but it carried a power that sent a chill down my spine. I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone. The world around me was empty, still, but the air, it felt alive, like something was watching me, waiting. Emily, you are not free. The voice spoke again, clearer this time, sending a shock of recognition through me. It wasn't just a voice, it was the entity. My blood ran cold. How could it still be here? I had destroyed the altar, the rituals. I had broken the silence. How could it still reach me? You think you've defeated me, the voice continued. Its tone no longer soft, but a low, guttural rumble. I am not bound to one place, Emily. I am not contained by your rules. You have only scratched the surface. You can break the rituals, but you cannot break me. I felt my legs weaken beneath me, my knees threatening to buckle as the reality set in. The farm was gone, but the entity, it had been feeding on the people there for so long. It was no longer just a thing tied to that land. It was something more. Something ancient and bound to the very fabric of the world. Its influence was deeper than I had realized. I staggered backward, eyes searching the empty forest, but there was no sign of the entity. It wasn't visible, but I could feel its presence, like a dark cloud hanging over me. It wasn't done. You may have won a small battle, but I am eternal. It whispered again, the voice now growing faint, like a fading memory. And you, Emily, have become a part of me. You cannot escape me. You cannot outrun your fate. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, my hands shaking with the weight of what I was hearing. This wasn't over. The entity was still out there, still lurking in the shadows, and it wasn't going to let go of me so easily. I was no longer just a victim of the farm. I had become something different, something it now claimed. The rules had shaped me, but they had also turned me into a tool for the entity's purpose. It had made me break the silence, and now it was coming for me, following me wherever I went. But I wouldn't let it win. I couldn't, not after everything I had already endured. The fight had just begun, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges and danger. But this time, I wouldn't be running from the truth. I would find a way to break its hold completely. The wind stirred in the trees as I stood there, trying to catch my breath, my mind racing. I had chosen to break free from the farm, but now I had to choose what came next. I had to choose how to fight, how to destroy the force that had held so many under its control for so long. I turned away from the empty farm, the dark woods, and the voice that still echoed in my mind. There was still time to escape, to find a way to destroy the entity once and for all. But to do that, I had to confront it head-on, and I would. The air felt cold against my skin as I walked further away from the farm, the distance growing between me and the place that had once been my prison. But with each step, a gnawing feeling crept into my chest, a feeling that wouldn't leave. The voice, the entity's voice, still echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that I hadn't escaped. Not really. I had become a part of it, and it wasn't going to let me go easily. The road ahead was unclear, but I couldn't stop. Not now. I knew what I had to do, but the more I thought about it, the more the task seemed impossible. I had to destroy the entity, break its hold on me, break the hold it had on the farm, and on everyone who had ever been forced to obey its rules. The problem was I didn't know how. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to face it alone. I couldn't. The farm had taken so much from me, had turned my life upside down. I had seen what happened when people blindly followed its rules, when they let it control their every action, their every thought. I couldn't allow it to claim another victim. I had to find others, those who had suffered the same way I had, those who were still out there, still trapped by the silence and the fear. I remembered John, his warnings, his fear, his knowledge of the truth. If anyone could help me understand how to stop the entity, it was him. He knew the history of the farm, the sacrifices, the rituals. He knew the things I needed to learn to fight back. But where was he now? I hadn't seen him since the night I confronted Father. Had he disappeared too? I didn't have the answers yet, but I had to start somewhere. The city was the only logical place. The world beyond the farm was vast, and perhaps, somewhere in its depths, I could find the knowledge I needed to destroy the force that had controlled my life for so long. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the forest, the line between the farm and the rest of the world. The familiar, comforting hum of the city was faint, but still there, and I found myself yearning for it. I had never thought I would feel relief from a place as bustling and noisy as a city, but after everything I had been through, it felt like the only thing that would help me get out of the trap I had fallen into. I made my way to a small town on the outskirts of the farm's reach, a place I had passed by on my way to the farm months ago. I couldn't risk going back to the main city. I had to stay out of sight. The entity fathered the rules. They all had eyes. They were always watching, waiting for someone to make the wrong move. I couldn't afford another mistake. I found a small motel on the outskirts of the town, one that seemed to welcome strangers with open arms, its walls holding secrets of their own. As soon as I entered, I locked the door behind me and sat on the bed, my mind spinning with possibilities. What had I gotten myself into? What could I do to end it? The motel room was small, but it felt like a safe haven compared to the isolation of the farm. The world outside seemed so far away, but I knew that the real world was still out there, moving on, unaware of the darkness that had begun to seep from the farm into the world at large. I couldn't let the entity spread. The phone in the room sat untouched, but my hand reached for it anyway. The first thing I did was try to contact John. I remembered the number he had given me back when I had first arrived at the farm. The connection crackled at first, then went dead, but I wasn't ready to give up. I needed him. I tried again and again, calling the number until the ringing stopped, until the signal died out completely. There was no answer. Frustration gripped my chest as I slammed the phone down. Was he gone? Had he been taken by the entity like Lily? Had he left without a trace? The thought of it made my stomach churn, but I couldn't focus on it now. I had to keep moving forward. Then an idea struck me. I remembered an old legend, a story I had heard in passing about a cult in the mountains, far beyond the reaches of any civilized place. They were said to have practiced ancient rituals to communicate with forces beyond human understanding. I dismissed it as a myth back then, a story designed to scare children. But now, with everything I had seen, I realized that the myth could be the key to everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the farm had never been alone. It wasn't the only place to harbor such dark secrets. There were others out there, hidden away in the corners of the world, still following the same rituals, still feeding the same forces. I needed to find them, find the answers, before it was too late. I stood up, my resolve firming. I wasn't going to stop now. I would find a way to destroy the entity, even if I had to fight every step of the way. The truth about the farm and the rules was out there, and I would uncover it. But first, I needed allies. I needed to find those who knew what I was up against. I couldn't do it alone. And so, I set out, prepared to face whatever came next, knowing the path ahead would be treacherous, knowing the cost of defying the entity would be great. But there was no turning back. The fight for survival had only just begun. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew that I couldn't stop now. I had uncovered the truth about the farm, the entity, and the terrible price that had been paid by everyone who had ever lived there. But the truth was just the beginning. I had broken the rules, I had defied the entity, and now it was time to finish what I had started. I had learned enough to know that there was no escaping the entity. It was more than just a creature. It was a force, something that fed on silence, fear, and submission. But I also knew that it could be defeated. It had to be. I set out toward the mountains, following the trail of rumors and whispers that had led me here. The ancient cults, the forgotten rituals, they were all pieces of a puzzle that would give me the answers I needed. I couldn't fight the entity alone. I needed the knowledge of those who had studied such forces, who had dealt with them before. They were out there, somewhere, hidden away in the depths of the world. And I would find them. The journey was long, but with each mile, I felt a sense of purpose return. The fear that had gripped me back at the farm was still there, lurking in the back of my mind, but I couldn't let it control me. The entity had fed on that fear for far too long, and I wasn't going to let it win. I had made my choice. I was going to destroy it. When I finally reached the mountains, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The air was thin, the cold biting at my skin, but there was something else, a presence in the air that I couldn't shake. It wasn't the entity, but something that felt connected to it, something older, deeper. I had come to the right place. The cult was real. I found them deep in the heart of the mountains, hidden away from the world. They had been waiting for someone like me, someone who had broken free, who had defied the entity. They had been watching from the shadows, ready to help those who were brave enough to face the darkness. But they weren't offering me just answers. They were offering me something much more valuable, the key to stopping the entity once and for all. They took me into their sanctum, a hidden temple carved into the side of the mountain. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, the air thick with the weight of rituals long forgotten. They told me that the entity was not just a force of nature. It was an ancient being, something that existed outside of time, feeding on the souls of those who dared to follow its rules. And the only way to destroy it was to sever its connection to the physical world, but doing so would require a sacrifice. I had expected that. There was no victory without cost, no true freedom without price, but the choice was mine. I could end it. I could destroy the entity, break the chain that had bound it to the farm and the world, but I would have to give up something in return. the leader of the cult, an old man with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries, told me that the entity's hold on the world could only be severed by the blood of one who had been marked by it, someone who had crossed the threshold of its rules, someone like me. The ritual would require my blood, my soul, to create the final barrier that would trap the entity once and for all. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. Could I do it? Could I give up everything I had left, knowing that the price of destroying the entity was my own life? But as I looked around the temple, at the faces of the people who had come before me, I knew the answer. I had no choice. The entity had already taken so much. It had taken my parents, my peace, my freedom. It had taken Lily and countless others. I couldn't let it take any more. I stepped forward, the cult leader's eyes meeting mine, and without a word, I knew what I had to do. I accepted the sacrifice. The ritual was intense, the air crackling with power as the symbols on the walls lit up, glowing with an unnatural light. I could feel the energy building around me, the entity's presence growing stronger, but it couldn't stop what was happening. The sacrifice was complete. With a final cry, the entity screeched in fury, its power being ripped from the world, torn away by the force of the ritual. I could feel its grip loosening, its hold on the farm, on the world, fading. And then, with one last deafening roar, the entity was gone. The temple fell silent. The power that had once filled the air now dissipated, leaving only a faint echo of the force that had once ruled us all. I stood there, breathing heavily, knowing that I had done it. The entity was gone, the farm was free, but the cost had been high, the sacrifice had been mine. As the dawn broke over the mountains, I knew that my journey had come to an end. The fight for survival had been brutal, and the price of victory had been my soul. But in the end, I had chosen freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The farm was no longer a prison, and neither was I. The entity was gone. The silence had been broken, and with it, I had finally found the peace I had been searching for all along.